Okay. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening, everyone. Respected friends and members of the PMI UAE chapter. My name is Irene Corpus, and I am honored to be your moderator for tonight. We hope you are all doing well, and we would like to thank you for attending our chapter's regular monthly webinar series. For tonight, our esteemed speaker, Mr. Kareem will talk us through the 10 timeless reasons for innovation. But before we proceed, allow me please to present some slides about the PMI and the PMI UAE chapter. You know that PMI, Project Management Institute, is a world leader. We work on your behalf to advance the project management profession worldwide. The PMI UAE chapter is the UAE chapter of the US-based PMI, run by 100% volunteers. We are proud to be in the top 5% of the chapters globally in terms of members, and we are growing day by day. We are passionate about project management and personal development, networking, and education. We, as the PMI UAE chapter, are dependent on you in order to make our chapter activities as interactive and as invigorating as possible. Therefore, we actually encourage you to participate and contribute in our activities. Being a speaker, if you are interested to make any presentation as part of our monthly webinar series, throw questions in our Q&A portion later after our speaker, be a corporate sponsor, and also you can help us out as volunteer. We have a new and enhanced benefits in 2022. As you can see here, we have 4 pillars. We have the networking, the learning and knowledge sharing, career growth, and events. What we are doing right now is part of the events, which is diversified webinars. Okay, I also would like to present to you our sponsors for our webinar, the National Archives, the Ministry of Presidential Affairs, Dubai Health Authority, and our partner, IIL Middle East. You can follow and get more information about our chapter and our upcoming events through our pmiuae.org website, or you can follow us on our social media, PMI UAE chapter. We are on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube. Now, I know you are interested to know about your PDU information. You will receive 1 strategic PDU, and this will automatically be claimed upon for those who are registered in this webinar. You don't need to submit another application. The PDU will be credited to your account 4 weeks after this session. But please note that PDUs will not be awarded for those who leave the screen online and work on something else. Our colleague here, Mr. Olumide, can see who was there, who's just pretending to be there. So please, there's a lot to learn from Mr. Kareem, and we would like to request your full attention. You will have the Q&A after his presentation. If you don't receive your PDUs after 4 weeks, please email at info@pmiuae.org. So before I proceed now, let me please introduce to you our speaker. Mr. Kareem Shakir has over 20 years of experience in business and digital transformation, program and project management, business strategy, business process for engineering and automation, enterprise risk management, customer experience, and innovation. He covered a huge breadth of knowledge. He heads the project department in Dubai Trade, a DP World company, and oversees organizational strategy formulation and execution by delivering innovative products and services to transform the smart trade, the logistics, and supply chain sector, which is expected to reach 2 trillion dirhams by year 2026. Now about his talk. The pandemic has changed every aspect of how organizations operate. It has changed how we work, how we learn, how we interact physically and virtually, both personally and professionally. Therefore, to say that the pandemic has changed the world would be an understatement. With an ever-accelerating rate of change in almost all facets of life, economy, and business, almost every organization is looking for innovative ways to become more competitive, innovative, and futuristic. In this webinar, Mr. Kareem will demonstrate the timeless drivers for innovation and reflect on the present-day challenges associated with these drivers. Ladies and gentlemen, without any more further ado, let me give the virtual floor or the screen to Mr. Kareem to talk us through the 10 timeless reasons for innovation. On to you, Kareem.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much, Iron. Let me switch on my camera first. Can you view me?
Yes, we can.
Can you hear me clearly?
Clearly.
All right, very nice. Okay, just let me share my screen. All right, so you see my screen, Iron, right?
Yes.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Kareem, as Iron has already presented to you. And I'm heading a project management department in Dubai Trade, which is a subsidiary of DP World. However, I would like to mention that I'm not really representing my employer or my organization. I'm just representing myself, and whatever I'm going to present today, just, my personal views, reflection, and my recommendations and advices as well. Okay, so just to start with, a throwback at our annual gathering, which took place back in March, right before Ramadan, where I was just giving a keynote for PMI about a model which I called project entrepreneurship. And it's basically a combination of business strategy, startup culture, startup methodologies, and so on, which can enable organizations and corporates to innovate and be ahead of the competition of their rivals. So one of my slides was basically about why organizations or corporates are supposed to innovate, or what are the drivers, given the current circumstances we're all going through, which require each and every corporate, each and every organization to be innovative. And I have listed down 10 reasons or 10 drivers for innovation. And I asked in between everyone, when do you think this was ever compiled or written? And everyone was very much excited to say it was written right after pandemic eruption, or it was written in 2022, 2019, and so on. However, the list of reasons or drivers for innovation was actually compiled back in 1991, right? That's even before Google was founded. And subsequently, I started to think, why don't we just take the 10 drivers for innovation, okay, and laser focus on them and try to reflect on ongoing circumstances from economic standpoint, from emerging technology standpoint, and so forth. So what I have done, basically, I've taken the 10 drivers and I categorized them into 5 buckets, which we're going to go through subsequently. First one is related to economy. Second one is related to enterprise risk and emerging risks. Third one is related to technologies and emerging technologies, as we're going to see shortly. Fourth one is related to sustainability and corporate social responsibility. And last one is related to how human economy is forming the way forward to the upcoming years. So we're going to start by economy. And what I have done, actually, if you look at the driver, they have not been assigned equally, like under each and every category or theme, okay? You will not find 2, 2, 2, 2, and so forth. No, it's not divided equally. However, what you're going to see today is basically 5 themes, which we can consider as 5 drivers for innovation. So starting with the global economy landscape or digital economy, when pandemic erupted, when COVID-19 has hit each and every one, okay? Prior to that, we were actually in the middle of digital transformation revolution. And most of organizations were actually midway through the digital transformation journey. However, what COVID-19 has done, it has accelerated the journey. It has put each and every corporate and organization under too much pressure to start to digitalize or even digitize their assets, right? So as we can look back, if you look at the hindsight, you will realize that only organizations which were ahead in the digital transformation journey could fulfill business and could meet actually partially or maybe fully their customers' expectations and so on. So looking from global or macro standpoint, we have come across 4 major crises, okay? First one is related to chip crisis or semiconductors. And I'm sure you might have heard of it. It's basically about, the lack of chips and lack of ICs, lack of electronic components, which are basically required literally in each and every industry. And when pandemic has hit very badly, what happened? Most people were sitting in home. Most of people were not driving to their workplaces. And what happened? There was too much demand from all aspects, from all domains, from all businesses. Basically, if you look alone at education, right? Each and everyone was trying to get either a tablet, iPad, or laptop in order to enable remote learning. Likewise, when people were actually locked down in their houses, each and every one was trying to get some kind of entertainment. So that's why people were trying to place orders to get TVs, to get Xboxes, to get PlayStations, and so on. So what happened? There was too much demand for semiconductors. But midway through it, due to the pandemic, what happened? Most of factories were actually shut down. And there has been a lot of delays related to air cargo movement, which has actually declined by 20% only in 2020. And due to some other issue related to Boeing aircrafts, especially in the P777 model, many aircrafts have been grounded due to engine failures, right? Which also has had its own toll negatively on the movement of air cargo. Likewise, if you look at auto industry alone, in 2020 alone, $60 billion have been lost in terms of revenue by automakers. And only the companies which could sustain, which could actually ensure that their supply chain is well in place, could only come out even stronger. Very good and close example is Tesla. If you look at containers, we are actually, we've been going through a very big issue related to shipping as a whole and the container availability, etc. And that's again due to the lack of synchronization, or actually due to the pandemic different time zone, if I can call it so. For example, in China, pandemic started quite earlier compared to US and the rest of the world. So what happened when China was shutting down, each and every other nation was open and operating normally, and vice versa. When China started to release or relieve, their pandemic lockdown, what happened? Most of other countries, including US, was actually shutting down. So there has been, imbalance in supply and demand. And what happened is, 4 containers out of 10 were actually returning from US to China, back to China. And this actually led to, like skyrocketing rates related to freight charges, which has actually gone up to 7-fold by the Q4 of 2021. And if you look at some commodities like coffee beans, for example, coffee beans prices have doubled. Okay, you might not, feel it as a consumer or someone who's buying his coffee from Costa or Starbucks. But what's happening? The coffee industry is under too much pressure as well, due to the price surge in coffee beans availability and the price as well. Looking at Suez Canal blockage, which we all have seen, and if you look at actually at Suez Canal, 30% of all containers and almost 12% of world trade is only passing through Suez Canal on a daily basis. When the blockage happened, there has been a delay of cargo, which is valued around $9 billion a day. Can you imagine? And you can multiply that by 7 because it lasted for a week. And this actually, again, led to price surge, led to higher prices and lack of many commodities, not only in US, but also in Europe as well. And last but not least, the war in Ukraine. We're all going through the oil prices, and we see what's happening, year on year, 81% increment of oil prices. And actually, the WTO has reviewed their expectation or downgraded their expectation for trade growth in the year 2022 from 4.7% to 3%. What's meant by that is it's going to continue. The inflation is going to continue. And this only has been released a couple of days ago. by IMF, International Monetary Fund. And if you look at some countries like, for example, if you look at Venezuela, it's 500% inflation increment. If you look at Turkey, which we're all familiar with, 60% increment. Some countries like Sudan, 245%, and so forth. So the reason of highlighting this kind of challenges is no one is protected. This is actually the price or the toll of globalization. It's not only having its own pressure on organizations and corporates, but it's also having its own toll on each and every person, each and every individual, and so on. Okay, moving to the second aspect, which is basically digital economy, right? So the second driver is US economy. It's not actually US economy alone, it's a global economy. It's being transformed from an industrial economy to one which is based on knowledge. And we're referring to that as a knowledge economy. And if you look at what we're going through now, it's basically IR4. What's meant by IR4? Industrial Revolution 4.0. And I've given it a term which is biodigital. What I mean by biodigital is biological, digital, and physical as well, where all of these universes, are getting actually intertwined, where a business model and new business models are being introduced, where new experience for people are being introduced, where actually there is a very fine line now between what's virtual and what's physical, and so on. So the first industrial revolution was basically when machines were first introduced, right? Secondly, the second one was basically when we started having production lines. And third one is related to digital revolution and communication revolution. And fourth one, which is basically combining what is digital, biological, and physical as well. If you look at S&P 500, and it's basically S&P 500 is an index which is including the biggest 500 corporates in terms of market value. It's contributing, or actually technology companies or knowledge-based companies are only contributing to 30% out of it, which is quite a huge number. If you look at US alone, 36% of the total economy of the United States is only coming from knowledge economy. And only in the year 2021, $165 billion, is going or coming from the knowledge-based economy. If you try to take a local look, or try to focus locally, you will realize, by the year 2030, Dubai is taking the lead, in the metaverse, cryptocurrency, trying to be a cryptocurrency hub, and so on. So there has been a strategy which has been released by Sheikh Hamdan to basically secure 42,000 virtual jobs by the year 2030. And the volume of the metaverse economy alone is going to hit $4 billion again by the year 2030. And as a very first authority in the world has been established, it's called VARA, you might have heard of it in the news already, which stands for Virtual Assets Regulatory Authority. And subsequently, it has set up its own HQ in the metaverse itself, on the sandbox, virtual assets platform. Okay, second theme is related to emerging technologies. Okay, and we cannot really talk about emerging technologies without talking about Moore's law. What's meant by Moore's law? It's a law, or actually a theory, which has been coined by Gordon Moore back in 1965. Gordon Moore is one of the co-founders of Intel, and he claimed that number of transistors is going to double every couple of years, and the price is going to decline again every couple of years. And this has been actually a driving force for the semiconductor industry and for digitalization as a whole. If you look at Microsoft, for example, as per Satya Nadella back in Q1 2020, and that's basically before pandemic eruption, he stated that we saw 2 years of digital transformation only in a couple of months. And that's basically due to the Windows adoption, which has increased by 30% year on year. And GitHub has hit milestone of 50 million developers. And as you might know already, GitHub is owned by Microsoft. According to Ray Kurzweil, he's saying we will not experience 100 years of progress in 21st century. However, it's going to be like 20,000 years of progress. And if you don't know about Mr. Kurzweil, he's actually a founder of some university called Singularity University, which has been co-founded by Criswell and Google as well. And if you try to look into it, you will realize that what we are going through is basically a sort of exponential growth. It is actually exponential. It's not sort of exponential. So if you look at this one, all right, it's basically acceleration of acceleration, right? So it's a double, the acceleration. And that's exactly what he mentioned in his book, Singularity is Near, where he's mentioning acceleration of acceleration. It's as if you're trying to climb a hill and suddenly you get a jetpack. All right, so when it comes to new technologies or emerging technologies, according to a new research report from McKinsey, what they are claiming that 10 next years will witness technological advances more than what we had in last 100 years or last century. Likewise, if you look at e-commerce, for example, it has grown, or actually within 3 months of e-commerce revenue, okay, but actually 10 years of e-commerce growth has been compressed only in 3 months in late 2019. Again, that was actually before pandemic erupted. Okay, so again, back to McKinsey's study, you will find a lot of technology enablers here. Like on the left-hand side, you'll find domain agnostic or industry agnostic technologies, which are going to shape up, the next 10 years and up to 2050, actually, not only the 10 next years or 10 next years, yeah. And the ones which are on the right-hand side from 8 to 10 are very, very specifically related to certain domains. So technologies just like process automation, and now we are seeing a lot of adoption increasing for our pair of robotic process automation. Likewise, for future of connectivity and 5G, now we started talking even about 6G. So up to 80% of global population will be reaching or using 5G by the year 2030. Distributed infrastructure, when it comes to cloud computing, for example, more than 75% of enterprises will be using or will be on the cloud by the year 2025. And like we've seen over past 5 years, there was so much, constraints related to adopting cloud computing, and many organizations, even locally or even globally, were having certain sort of superstition related to why would a company or organization move to the cloud. Now we're seeing most, if not all, of organizations are adopting cloud computing. Next generation computing, such as, like quantum computing. So by the year 2035, over $1 trillion of economy will be built upon quantum computing. If you look at applied AI, now we are looking at so many systems called CPS or cyber physical systems, as opposed to smart systems, as we've seen in past few years. And basically, if you look at applied AI, you can, as of today, you're having applied AI. If you look at Alexa, if you look at some technologies like NLP, natural language processing, which is enabler for Siri and all virtual assistants and so on, machine learning, the big data, etc. This is all falling under applied API, or sorry, applied artificial intelligence. Future programming, the time to program has declined by 30x, can you imagine? And now we are seeing a lot of advances related to zero code application development and so on. Last but not least is blockchain or trust architecture. So by 2027, we're going to see 10% of global GDP, global domestic product of all the world economy is only coming from blockchain. And again, Dubai is taking the lead, towards adopting blockchain and introducing business models only based on the blockchain. Biorevolution, okay, when it comes to genome engineering, now you can do sequencing of genome of human genome in very short time using only $100. And there is one famous company called the 23andMe. It's actually a joint venture between Google and the founder of the company. It's only looking after sequencing of human genome. And unless you know about what is the value or what is the benefit of human genome sequencing, it's basically you can just take a sample of your saliva, send it back to the lab, and it can tell about your origins, about your ancestors, about your true race, if you'd like to know about it. And again, it can somehow anticipate certain diseases in the future, given your DNA and given your genome. And you can do all of that actually for $99. It's called the 23andme.com. Next generation materials. Now we are looking at some cars which can change their colors. For example, if you can just Google or go to YouTube, just type BMW car changing color. And that's again related to coming up with new materials. These new materials are going to introduce a totally new set of sector or totally new set of industries. Last but not least, clean energies or clean technologies. Again, over 75% of global energy will be produced by renewables by the year 2050. Okay, competitive strategy. That's basically our third theme. And if you look at competitive strategy, we cannot really talk about competitive strategy without talking about Michael Porter's 5 forces. You might be aware of it already. And basically what Michael Porter is saying any organization is under competition based on 5 dimensions, or he's referring to them as 5 forces. So first one is related to new entrants. What's meant by new entrants? Where you are producing or you are providing a certain service and you have a new entrant. Okay, just as an example, we are seeing a lot of startups which are competing not only with big sharks like Google and Apple, etc., but with each and every other organization or corporate. To take a very local example, Angami, for example, when Angami started, everyone was saying no, it cannot compete against Apple Music, it cannot compete against Spotify, and Angami actually has been a very bright success story, and we all have seen, Angami coming out of Dubai, and it's been listed in Nasdaq as the very first Arabic company to be listed in Nasdaq. All right. So second force is related to substitution. Okay, what's meant by being substituted? You're providing a product at any single point of time, you can be substituted. Think from a perspective where I've got a problem and I'm using X product. However, suddenly I realize I can use a replacement or an alternative product for lesser price, for better quality, and so on. A very quick example is when you're using iPad now, you can very much use iPad or tablet, okay, instead of your laptop, which is actually putting pressure on some other organizations or hardware manufacturers, for example, Dell, who are not really producing or manufacturing any tablets as far as I know. Suppliers, we all have seen the supply chain crisis. We all have seen the pressure on the semiconductor manufacturers and suppliers, right? So you also need to manage, the pressure or the competition from your suppliers as well as your buyers, right? Now, with a lot of options at the discretion of buyers, now I can switch from one product to another product, from one service to another service very easily. For example, now you can very easily switch from Android to iOS and vice versa, right? Okay, so last force is basically where you are competing with organizations at your level. And Michael Porter is referring to it as industry rivalry, okay? So you can compete based on the price tag, okay, which is one big determining factor. However, given a recent research conducted by American Express, it turned out that people are willing to pay more to get a more quality service, right? And I always give the example of the vibes you're getting, when you step into an Apple store compared to Samsung store, right? If you look at iPhone is costing Apple 1/3 of what you guys are paying for or what I'm paying for to buy an iPhone. However, I'm only caring about customer experience, which is also including user experience, given the very much user friendliness of iOS and the replacement you can get within your warranty period and so on. It's completely different compared to any other company. If you look at some companies, some companies are competing based on advertising, right? And they put a lot of money in advertising. But what's happening, I'll give a very quick example of Tesla. And Tesla is actually paying, can you imagine, $0 for advertising among all other automakers. They are not having any budget for advertising. It's crazy when you really sit and think about it, right? But on the flip side, you will find out that Tesla is having the biggest budget amongst all car makers for R&D, for innovation. And this is where I'm just trying to highlight the importance of innovation and the customer experience. And when we talk about innovation, it has to be human-centric innovation. It has to solve real everyday's problems, right? So you can really say it's an innovation. And again, Tesla is a very good example because they have zero budget for advertising and the biggest budget amongst all car makers, right, when it comes to R&D and innovation. Very quick example related to having or how to manage a competitive strategy. There's one company called ARM, you might have heard of it, and basically what ARM is doing in each and every consumer electronics or each and every gadget or device, okay, you will have a processor, a microprocessor or CPU. The CPU is based on some technology, okay, introduced by ARM. It's called RISC. And what's happening is Samsung is using RISC technology. If you look at Amazon, to enable Amazon AWS or hosting, you know, they're using again their devices for Kindle, for Amazon Fire, etc. They're using RISC-based processors from ARM. At the same time, NVIDIA, I'm sure you know about NVIDIA because it's the leading organization when it comes to GPUs or graphic processing units. We're trying to acquire ARM. So most, if not all, of big sharks were actually complaining about that specific deal or acquisition. And up until Tesla came into it and Elon Musk started to tweet and raise a red flag about it, you know, because he's getting the GPU for Tesla cars from NVIDIA. At the same time, the CPU is coming from ARM. So each and every organization did not really want to have what we are referring to as supplier concentration. They didn't want to have sort of monopoly when it comes to graphics and CPU, right? And ultimately what happened, that NVIDIA had to abandon, you know, the entire deal, which was supposed to be completed for $40 billion, right? So that's a very good example where actually you need to manage your risk in terms of supplier, in terms of, you know, customer as well. Being a customer, you can put pressure on your service provider, and being a supplier also, you need to manage your supplier. Another model which I'm very much willing to highlight, it's called competition. What I mean by competition, it's a merge between competition and cooperation, right? What's meant by it? It's sometimes you have to compete, sometimes you have to cooperate with your rivals. Very quick example, Intel is competing with ARM, but Intel actually very lately started to manufacture ARM processors. If you look at the collaboration, which we're all familiar with, between Pfizer and BioNTech, right? Without which maybe the COVID-19 vaccine might not have been viable or it might have been delayed to great extent. But what Pfizer has done, they have collaborated or combined or built or set up a joint venture, right, with BioNTech until they could deliver the vaccine efficiently. Another interesting example, if you look at Netflix is actually hosted on AWS. And at the same time, Netflix is competing with Prime, Amazon Prime, right? So that's a very good example of competition, right? You don't always have to compete. You can also cooperate or build some JV with your rivals. When it comes to complexity, which is basically our fourth theme, complexity and instability. Just a very quick timeline, and that's again from my own perspective, it's my own reflection. Right, we started by COVID-19, which led to supply and demand imbalance, which again led to unemployment rates due to lack of resources, human resources, physical resources, supply chain disruption, and so on. And US government started to give stimulus checks, which again led to higher inflation rates. And the central bank has to intervene where interest rates have been actually increased. And the monetary policy and more interest rates are expected to take place, which led actually to market volatility. And it all ended up by having, you know, the geopolitical disruption now between Ukraine and Russia. So if you look from analytical perspective, you'll find out for the very first time in March 2022 the geopolitical risk has superseded the pandemic risk. So just before March 2022, the pandemic was the top interest of each and every organization, each and every person. And up until March 2020, what happened now? Everyone is much worried about geopolitical instabilities, right? When we talk about complexity, I am just willing to highlight one small image, which is on the left-hand side. That's basically called iPhone supply chain. And if you look at this one, if you take a closer look, you realize each and every component. First and foremost, the iPhone, as we all know, is designed in California by Apple. And each and every component is coming from different region, from different country, from South Korea, from Texas Instruments in USA, Micron, again, from memory for USA. If you look at Germany, it's basically for networking component. If you look at Italy for power adapter and so on, and ultimately it's getting assembled in China, right? What do we need to learn from all of this? That, you know, the today's scenario or the economy or business we're going through, it is very much complex, as we can realize, right? And what we can learn that VUCA, what I mean by VUCA, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity. And that's basically one of the top risks or top focus areas in any organization. The more technology you have, the more interconnectivity, the more outsourcing, the more touch points you're going to have, you will increase complexity. Likewise, globalization, we all have seen before in my first slides, you know, the impact of globalization on the economy and all organizations. Diversity, having people from different backgrounds with different values, you know, again, it is complicating and making, you know, the business environment much more complex. And with more complexity, you'll have more challenges which could be perceived as opportunities or business opportunities. ESG, what I mean by ESG, it is basically the quantitative side of corporate social responsibility. I'm sure in your organizations, you must have heard of sustainability, corporate social responsibility. But now, in order to quantify sustainability, we are having a model which is called ESG, environment, social, and governance. It's not exclusive to climate change. It's not exclusive to nature. No, it is also including social. It has some aspect related to people. It has some aspect related to governance, diversity of the board, related to lack of, you know, like any fishy practices like, you know, market manipulation, monopoly, like corruption, bribery, and so on. So this driver is related to workforce. And when you look at workforce, basically now we are dealing with Generation Z, okay? And soon enough, we're gonna have some people from Generation Alpha. Generation Alpha, as referred to iPad generation, it's basically for people born in 2012, right? And now we are seeing a new patterns, you know, within especially blue chip companies such as employee experience. It's not only customer experience, it's also important to pay too much attention to employee experience, especially when you have a lack of resources, lack of talents in the market, as we're going to see shortly, especially when you are seeing, you know, someone like Elon Musk, you know, being asked about Apple Car, and his quick answer without any thinking, he said, you cannot really hide it when you're hiring 100 designers, right? So it seems, it's very much evident leading organizations and innovative organizations such as Apple, Tesla, Microsoft, etc., are always competing to get resources and to actually make it more lucrative, you know, for their workforces to be more innovative and more productive. Again, widening global divide between haves and have-nots, right? Employee experience. Okay, now we were talking about knowledge economy. The next wave is human economy, and I'm gonna cover it in a later slide very soon. So it's basically when you look at employee experience, employees are actually expected to bring their own hearts and souls, you know, to workplace, and this to start to own what they are doing and have passion. And you will really have magical outcome when you have the organizational values mapped or actually having some intersection with the employer workforce values. And in a recent survey conducted by PwC, 75% of respondents have indicated they would like to work for an organization which is really having a positive societal impact, which is really having a positive impact on environment, right? Which is not having any governance related issues. Resources, when you look at resources, okay, the most scarce resource nowadays is basically water. And this is basically indicating, the most affected regions or, nations in terms of water. Just to give a quick example, if you look at a country or a nation like China, even though you have 20% of world population living in China, we've only got 5% of fresh water within China, right? Actually, countries have started to hunt clouds and introduce cloud seeding. So imagine some clouds are moving from country A to country B. Country A might start shooting or actually, induce or, like give a catalyst for cloud seeding before the clouds move to another neighboring country. So you can imagine to what extent water is having a negative impact, on global economy and environment. And there's no wonder, most of organizations now are trying to reduce water, right, from their manufacturing end-to-end process. When it comes to human resources or human capital, you will realize, in a recent Gartner study as well, 64% in a survey filled by CIOs and IT executives cite talent shortages as the biggest barrier to digital transformation, especially in the domains which are quite novel, such as artificial intelligence, machine learning, analytics, etc. And that's compared to 4% in 2020. Yeah, so quite a big jump. And if you look at IBM, for example, if I can cite IBM has indicated again in a recent study, and that's actually in Europe. It's not in a developing country or Middle East or Africa or whatever it is. They are saying that Europe is having a very big disadvantage when it comes to availability of AI skills, right? And only 7 out of 10 are qualified for an AI career, right? If you look at F&B sector, we have all seen, the Great Resignation, as they are coining it or referring to it, and the 25% decline happened only in 2020 compared to 2016 in terms of workforce within the F&B industry, right? So again, I cannot stress enough the importance of people and the human factor, as I mentioned earlier. And in a recent HBR or Harvard Business Review article, they are saying digital transformation is mostly failing or not happening due to people, because of people, not because of technology, right? Last driver is related to environment, ESG, shareholder, and activism related to climate change, to equal gender responsibilities or rights, and so on. And what you're seeing on the screen now as a cartoon strip, it's happening in many organizations, right? I mean, a lot of organizations are caring for shareholder values, their P&L, their income statement, their profitability, and so on. But they might have some practices which are having a negative toll on the environment, right? So what United Nations has done, they have come up with a model for sustainability, which is including 17 SDG. SDG is Sustainability Development Goal. And as you can see on the screen, it includes a lot of noble and lofty goals, such as no poverty, zero hunger. You can see here reduce inequalities, quality education, workforce rights, and so on, right? So basically, they are aiming to reach this goal or this set of goals by the year 2030. That's why now you'll find a lot of organizations, maybe including yours as well, are paying too much attention to sustainability, right? Because by the year 2030, United Nations are trying to reach, a sustainable environment or sustainable globe, right? And if you look at ESG is the quantitative part of it. So under each and every goal, you'll have some metrics, which ultimately is going to give you some score, all right? And why it's important? Because on the rise, we are seeing now patterns to what we are referring to ESG investing, or environment, social, governance investing. In a nutshell, most of teenagers, or most of younger generations, even older ones, are paying too much attention to noble causes, such as climate change, such as equal gender rights, such as workforce, rights, and so on, and humanity, etc. And what's happening? There is some index called Smp Esg Index. What it does, it's basically including the best companies which are scored high in terms of ESG, or environment, social governance, right? And very recently, you'll find a lot of case studies for shareholder activism, right? People and institutional investors are putting too much pressure on board of directors of many companies, okay, such as Exxon Mobil, Chevron, Hugo Boss, actually, CEO has been brought down only because of pressure from investors, right? And it's been observed by Harvard as well, that if any company is taking a positive measure, right, towards sustainability, their share price is increasing in the subsequent days. It's not only about climate, it's not only about environment or ESG. Sometimes it plays or it pays back quite well. Very close example is Tesla. Okay, so if you look at Tesla, Tesla is selling what we are referring to as carbon credits. Carbon credits, it's given by US government to organizations. Okay, so they won't exceed certain carbon dioxide emission rates. If they exceed it, they will have to pay back the government, right? And what Tesla is doing, Tesla is having certain balance of carbon credits, and because they are not using them, or their products are not actually emitting carbon dioxide or polluting as much as the gasoline-based vehicles, right? They are selling it to some other car makers. And if you take a closer look, this is basically the chart of carbon credit sales for Tesla. So can you see it's almost double between Q4 2021 and the Q1 2022. This is a very recent chart which we are looking at. And profit out of Tesla's profit, can you imagine 20% out of Tesla's profit is only coming from carbon credit sales? It's mind-blowing when you really sit and think about it, right? Okay, and a few days ago, I would say less than a week ago, back to the ESG index, which I was referring to, right? Tesla has been dropped. Can you imagine? Tesla has been dropped from the ESG index, right? And Elon went very wild on Twitter, and we all know what's happening when Elon gets very wild on Twitter. So he's saying Exxon is rated top 10 best in world for environment, ESG, basically by S&P 500, while Tesla did not make it to the list. So out of 500 companies, Tesla is not listed. It is mind-blowing, right? And he's saying ESG is a scam, okay? And when I dug deeper, on why it happened, that's basically what S&P organization is saying, because of lack of low carbon strategy, because of codes of business conduct, okay, racial discrimination, and poor working conditions. So as you might observe here, guys, Tesla has been ranked very high when it comes to the E, which is basically environmental impact. But when it comes to social and governance, it's been ranked very low, right? But no one would have ever expected that they wouldn't make it to the list of top 500 companies. I don't know what could be your perception on this, but ultimately, Elon, posted a tweet a couple of days ago, which was quite funny. So that's basically what he posted, that's Tesla. And this is 6 oil companies, because out of the 500 companies, 6 oil companies have been listed actually in the S&P 500 ESG index, right? Quite funny. So what can we learn? I believe I still have 6 minutes remaining. Okay, and these are basically my own observations, my own reflections, right? So to win the marketplace, you must first win the workplace. Even if you look from a strategic standpoint, from strategy standpoint, you always start with your capabilities, with your workforce, your human capital, and so on. right? And if you do it right, if you have the right set of people, right set of talents and capabilities, it's very much likely you're gonna be able to win the marketplace, right? And that's exactly what blue chip companies are doing, like Apple, Samsung, and so on. You need to think blue ocean. What I mean by blue ocean is you need to distinguish yourself. You need to have a, like an edge. You need to have a feature which no one else can clone or copy. So your competition will be less in terms of, competitive strategy. You need to start with why. Don't think of a product. Don't think of revenue. Just start by looking at issues, genuine pressing issues, right? And try to find creative and innovative solutions for that. Be it a startup, be it a product within an organization, right? And you need to build and level supply chain, right? You need to not only look at your direct supplier, however, you also need to look at your supplier as a supplier, okay? Because by shifting the risk to your supplier, it's not going to help you sustain your business. It's not going to ensure you're going to be bulletproof and you will be able to continue and have whatever resilience you're trying to have to your business, right? You need to look after sustainability development goals. You need to have an ESG strategy, because it's not only about environment and social and governance, right? It is also about your standing, about your brand image. A lot of companies are, competing on the basis of brand image, and Apple is a very good and close example as well. It's sort of a cult rather than, customer base. You need to future-proof your organization against black swan events. What I mean by black swan events is something that no one has ever thought of, such as pandemic, such as Great Recession back in the 30s, such as World Trade Center, attacks and so on, right? How can you think about that? You need to be creative and you need to think of unpotential or non-potential scenarios, right? Which might or might never happen. And just like I was saying, the companies or organization which started the digitalization or digital transformation journey earlier compared to their competitors could actually, be ahead of the game, could sustain, could actually post amazing results even during the COVID pandemic crisis. And you need to shift to human economy. What I mean by human economy, we started by having a brawn. What I mean by brawn, you wanted to have muscle, especially within factory sectors, within industrialization, sector and so on. And moving from brawn to brain. That's again my own analogy, from brawn to brain. Brain where you are pulling people from factories and people now are sitting in workplaces. We have a lot of white collar professionals, right? You need their brains. But now, according to Harvard, we are moving to human economy. What I mean by human economy, you need to have workforce and talents which are actually having passion towards what they are doing, which believe in your organizational vision and mission and your societal impact and so on. So from brawn to brain to heart, okay? What I mean by heart, some stuff which cannot really be mimicked by machines, whether you have an artificial intelligence, whether you have a bot or whatever you have. And last but not least, you need to be more agile. You need to enable lean management, lean thinking, because lean is a philosophy before a set of practices or a process or even a tool. And within your organization, you need to promote entrepreneurship, right? You need to act as an entrepreneur within your organization if you really need to build innovative products, right? Because the best way to compete with startups and innovative products is to act like one, right? And that's what exactly I could cover in my last talk for PMI in a much more thorough way. You might have attended already. Yeah, you need to move from being VUCA-phobic, and that's again my own term, which I coined. Yeah, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity, because volatility is inevitable, right? We all see what's happening in terms of inflation, economies are changing, environment is changing, okay? And you need to start planning for it. You need to embrace it, right? Yeah, you need to be a vocalist instead of vocaphobic. And last but not least, I think I'm actually on time. I'm gonna close by one favorite quote, which I have, passion towards. It's by Eisenhower, which is plans are nothing, planning is everything. What I mean by that, you can have the best plan. You can spend years, if not months, okay, to build your own plan. But you also need to be adaptive, right? Your plan should not be set in stone. You have to be adaptive. You have to be flexible. You have to enable agility. Agility as mindset and thought process, not Scrum or not Kanban or not XP or whatever methodology you might be using. It is a mindset. It is a philosophy. So your business is always in motion, and you always have to adapt to whatever circumstances, whatever calamities which might be thrown at your business, right? Thank you so much for listening, and back to you, Irene.
Wow, that's a whole lot of knowledge there. To be honest, I'm taking a lot of keywords, Kareem. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
Mind-blowing. It's like a huge and vast amount of knowledge. Therefore, I know I will not be able to capture the very details of your talk, but please, before I go to the Q&A, just let me share what I have captured, the keywords, I would say the
Please.
keywords,
Go ahead.
important keywords, okay? There's business is changing at a very accelerated rate compared to the previous decades.
Exponential one, you can mention.
Exponential, yes.
Yeah.
If before they can develop a new one model of a PC to another in 10 years, now it's becoming months, a little year or in months. You highlighted a lot about ESG, or the environment and social governance, to mention as well that even the UAE is pushing about the companies to participate in the carbon neutral 2030. There are some companies joining that challenge. Okay, so there are 17 SDGs. I would like to encourage the others to read about that. Technology or digitalization is not only about technology. I can agree with you on that, because even agriculture is getting digitalized, no?
Yeah, everything is being digitalized. Everything
is digitalized. Yeah. So yeah, we are talking about digital transformation, agility. You talk about the big players already in the industry, Google, Apple, etc. Now, related to all of this, there is a question from Abdul Salim. His question is this: bigger companies struggle to be agile and transformative, but at the same time, there are startups who are able to disrupt these corporations. How do you address this? Or how is this being addressed?
From organizational standpoint, you mean?
Yes, on the organization.
Yeah. Just like I have mentioned, and again, that's my own reflection. The only way you can compete with a startup is to act like one, or the best way to compete with startups is to act like one. And as I might have mentioned in my last talk, I think, some people have already attended it, that entrepreneurs are everywhere. Yeah, it's one of the principles of entrepreneurships. What I mean by that, you are a 9-to-5 employee, but you are an entrepreneur. You can be an entrepreneur, okay? If you are acting or adopting the right mentality or mindset, okay, philosophy, process, which can make you an entrepreneur, right? You are an entrepreneur within your organization. And I'll give you a very quick example. If you look at some organizations, such as General Electric, right? GE has an arm or a vertical under GE. It's called FastWorks. You can Google it later on. FastWorks, it's basically, like a fast lane under GE, where you can minimize the years to create a new product from 5 years to 12 months, right? Where you can have a prototype in 6 months, right? Because they are agile, they are lean, they are acting as a startup, and it's called FastWorks. A lot of organizations are doing that, by the way. You look at Google. Google is investing in universities. Google is investing even in the 23andMe, which I've mentioned before, right? Because Google's vision is to organize world's data. That's their vision, as we might know already, right? Which is also covering not only your data or your social profile, maybe your genome as well, your DNA as well, you know? So just to give a very short answer, the best way to compete with the startups and innovative and emerging, you know, companies, two things: you can act like them, and some other companies are acquiring them as well. Just like we saw NVIDIA was trying to acquire ARM, right? I hope I could answer your question.
Yeah, very good, very good, very insightful as well. I can also think maybe about Jack Ma, you know, Jack Ma, as he grows, he leaves the innovation to the younger generations.
Yeah.
Because they are bringing in new mindset, and like what you are highlighting, invest in talent, develop capabilities, and talents that have the passion for what they are doing. So, yeah. Another question again from Abdul Salim: how do you deliver value than delivering products and services? I think you mentioned this, that if you're a newcomer, it's either you compete based on the price tag or on customer service. So
yeah, see, value. Yeah, can I answer this question?
Go ahead, please.
Yeah, I believe value lies in the eyes of the customer, you know, if I can put it in such a way, right? So value, if you start, don't look at value even, right? I mean, start with the business problem, okay? Once you tap the business problem, you will end up having a creative solution. And this solution itself, prior to launching it or making it, you know, like a mass launch to each and every customer or potential buyer or service consumer, right? You need to get some market validation. You need to go to market and have some pilot customers. You need to sense, you know, you need to learn about, you know, the customer. You need to learn about the problem which you're trying to solve. And you need to continue improving and enhancing it, you know. However, my only advice is to stay away from seeking perfection, right? Yeah. Because if you are a perfectionist, the chances are you will end up delivering nothing at all. Yeah. And that's actually one principle of the agility, which is basically delivering customer value. You're putting more emphasis on the customer collaboration versus or compared to, as opposed to contractual agreements or whatever it is. So the customer himself will have to be a partner, right, within or during your development stage or your product development stage as well. This is how you can ensure you are solving the right problem and you are delivering value as well.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much for explaining that. So I do not have any other questions in the Q&A box. So, oh, there's another one from Vishal. Very timely. Vishal, one of the slides highlighted that a substantial decline of skill availability in the markets was identified recently. But what could be the reasons for this decline, and how can we prepare for this in the future?
Okay, two things. First one is Great Resignation, as I referred to during my talk. It's coined as Great Resignation, where during pandemic, people have started to question their values, to question their lives, you know, to actually think outside the box and say, okay, why am I working for such an organization? Okay, maybe I'm working for FMB without mentioning any names. Why am I allowing, you know, such, you know, lousy working conditions? So first, Great Resignation, and it's not only exclusive to one sector, right? If you look, the most impacted sector is FMB. Secondly, if you look at the technology sector, a lot of people now are quitting and starting their own journeys, founding their own startups, right? Trying to be entrepreneurs rather than 9 to 5, right? That's a second example. And as we saw in the presentation, there is a lack of, you know, resources and talents, especially within new technologies such as AI, machine learning, and so on. And that's something which IBM is citing. So, something, again, you will find in most of recent studies, you know. So one big barrier to digitalization and technology, emerging technology adoption is lack of talents. To give a very quick example and close example is blockchain, right? It's not really easy to find, people who are actually good or actually adept in blockchain, given its novelty, right? And each and every day, technology, just like it's changing at exponential rate, we need to also have some time to learn and try to digest these emerging technologies.
Yeah.
I hope I could answer your question.
Yeah, Vishal, I hope we or Kareem was able to clarify this from you. Now, another question actually came from the chat box. What do you think about Tesla in terms of long-term sustainable business as it started to enter the red ocean soon? So maybe it will become a red ocean because other players will imitate now what Tesla is doing.
Absolutely.
So it will become red ocean, yeah.
Okay, two things I would like to mention. The first one takes me back to 2014, and one of the I was doing a lot of writings to PMI and PM Network, and you can Google it, you'll find it on pmi.org, right? Where at certain point of time, Elon Musk has decided to make all the patents of Tesla open source before even any other car maker was thinking or could produce a single electric car. That's one, okay? Secondly, my own personal view, and don't take it as an advice or, in anything else, yeah? I believe Tesla will still remain as a leader, as a market leader, okay? For many reasons, okay? Tesla is having a lot of aspirations, It's not only a car manufacturer. They are trying to move to being, like an energy provider, okay? I'm sure you might know about, the solar roofs they are providing, and, they're trying to have their own power grid, right? Yeah. And they are much more efficient compared to before. Right, I mean, like now in Europe, I think in US and in Europe recently, the Tesla chargers have been made available to all other brands, right? If you are a Tesla owner, you might be disappointed, but now this is how it is, Secondly, they are very much capitalizing on data, right? And just like water is the oil of the 21st century when it comes to natural resource, data is the new oil, as we can all refer to, right? Because Tesla has been gathering and collecting data since 2011, right? Since they started, and they have a lot of data on which they can capitalize, not for electric cars alone, but also for the FSD or full self-driving cars, right? So we still have not reached a point where FSD is 100% enabled. But when you capitalize on data, when you capitalize on learnings, right, for over a decade now with Tesla, you cannot really compare it with any company which is starting FSD, a couple of years ago or 1 year ago, right? So that's my own viewpoint. That's why I believe, I have firm belief that Tesla is going to continue, leading the market, not only in cars, but I mean with their strategy and especially if they enhance their scorings or their scales, in terms of social and governance, I believe no other company will be able to beat them.
Yeah, I believe so too. Yeah, okay, so I think we don't have any other question, and we are on time. Our attendees would love that we are on time. I thank everyone for their participation through the Q&A. Thank you for the questions that you have thrown. So finally, thank you very much, Kareem, for very informative session. Super, as what Abdul Salim was saying here.
Thank you for everybody.
And we'd like to invite everyone again for our upcoming session. Please register for the webinar on May 30. You can find it in our PMI UAE website. So on behalf of Ms. Rosanna, the Director of Events, and Olumide, my colleague here, who's at the back end, my name again is Irene Corpus, and wishing you all a great evening. And we hope you learn a breadth of knowledge and information on reasons to innovate. So until then, thank you very much. And
thank you, everyone. Have a good evening. Thank you. See you.
Bye.